It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And we're the Insiders. And today we're going to look into our crystal ball and make some predictions about what we think the top political stories will be in 2025. Chuck?
Well, I think there are several. First of all, progressives maintain their majority in the spring election, and surprisingly by a pretty good margin, harboring or sending a signal that there could be good results for Democrats in the fall of 2026. Number two, the state budget will be a huge thing. There will definitely be some major news out of this budget, either major agreement with a substantial shift toward Democrats getting much more of what they want in the budget, or Robin Vos leaving a huge revenue surplus that will be able to be spent by Democrats in the next after the next election, where they'll have billions and billions of dollars. And by the way, they'll still be taking on that new federal health care money. And maybe one of the biggest surprises, or one of the things that hasn't been talked about much now, there will be a surprise. Our congressional districts are gerrymandered. There are 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and this state, it doesn't get any closer. Tammy Baldwin wins by less than 1%. Donald Trump wins by less than 1%. One of the biggest surprises of 2025 will be redistricting in the congressional districts, which will result in Wisconsin electing 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans to the House of Representatives in 2026, which is, by the way, just 1 vote away from turning the majority, since the Republicans only have a 3-vote majority.
Well, that would be not all that surprising, I guess, if the Wisconsin Supreme Court would put its finger on the scales to help out the Democrats in the elections. I
Who
would say
offset the finger on the thumb on this scale by Robin Vos. Okay, go ahead.
So I would argue that I would say that there's a couple of stories that I think we can see will be big stories in 2025, and one of them you touched on, which is the Supreme Court elections. That election is consequential. It will determine lots of stories throughout the year. So whoever gets elected in April and takes office in August will be sitting there making decisions right away in September in that court. And a lot of major issues are going to come up before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, not just in 2025, but for years to come. So I think that is likely to be perhaps the biggest and most consequential political story of 2025 is who wins that spring election for the Supreme Court. One you didn't say, but I think is also a big possible story in 2025, and that is Governor Evers' decision about whether or not to run for re-election. He's likely to make that decision sometime in 2025. If he chooses to run for re-election, he's a favorite in the climate that we have, where Washington is controlled by Republicans. Democrat governor candidates will do well, particularly an incumbent, and so that will shape that race for governor quite a bit. If he chooses not to run, that kicks the race wide open. And I think there'll be a lot more candidates on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican. And those people who choose to run for governor will probably, in half of those people, will be leaving another office to do that. And that will scramble the deck all below it. So I think that those 2 things are likely to be huge stories for politics in Wisconsin in 2025.
Well, I think that I think Scott's right. That's an additional one, but I think there are a lot of things that are going to be happening, and I think it will be a more consequential year in 25 than the off year from the election year than a lot of people see. So, but I do believe the biggest thing in terms of the impact on people's lives in Wisconsin, most of the other stuff is who's going to be running the show. The most consequential thing, you could argue that it's Supreme Court, but I really think this budget and the literally billions of dollars that we have, and the fact that we haven't taken the federal healthcare money, I think you're going to see that start to swing. I think if Republicans continue to act the way they have legislatively, that we have a majority forever, they will be making a huge mistake, and it will redound to their disadvantage. They have to figure out now that it's a time to compromise, and I'm not sure they can figure that out. And if that doesn't happen, I think you're going to see a very different Wisconsin moving forward. So that one will have some big dollar consequences. as well as the Springs. But Scott's right, in terms of political world, kind of our world, the inside world of who's in and who's out, oh my goodness, yes, there could be a lot of open seats with a lot of different people running. But I think it'll be, no matter what, it'll be fun and it'll be interesting in 2025.
Looking forward to it.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.